Okay, so today I'm going to argue that I want to start again. This is not going as well as I imagined in my head. Can I start again? Yes. You can, if you stand up like next week doing your spoken presentation and you make a false start, it's fine to start over, I think. If once you get into it though, you you lose your way, just take a breather and try and get back onto it. You know what I mean? Okay, let me start again. Today I'll be talking about the Baz Luhrmann film production of Romeo+Juliet, and one aspect of interpretation, one focus it has that maybe other texts don't have so much. And in particular, I'm just going to look at the symbolism of the cross. I'm going to say three things about this symbol as used in the film. I'm going to suggest that the symbol of the cross is used to show and emphasize how death is such a real part of the story. Secondly, that the cross it kind of represents fate and destiny. And thirdly, that the cross sort of symbolizes the sacrifice that Romeo and Juliet actually make. Maybe they don't deliberately make a sacrifice, but nonetheless, there is a sacrifice which brings about some kind of change. First of all, in this film, the cross is used to symbolize death. Crosses are constantly shown in association with death. One example, obviously, is at the end of the film, when Romeo walks into the chapel down towards Juliet's body. He's walking past a whole lot of blue neon crosses, and this emphasizes the reality of well, actually she isn't dead yet, but we know that death is going to occur for both of them. So he's walking down the hallway through these blue crosses, and I think that's the blue shining cross in the darkness really highlights that death is going to take place. Because in Western culture in particular, the cross is associated with graveyards and cemeteries and death itself. Sometimes there are more subtle ways that the cross represents death. For example, I should have checked this before I started my spoken presentation. I think when Tybalt falls back into the fountain when he's shot, I think his body is in the cross shape. And maybe this highlights the pervasive reality of death in the play. Secondly, a cross, in a non-religious sense perhaps, is used as a motif for fate and destiny. Remember that in the prologue it says a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. So the idea of because they come from different places, their lives cross. And there's kind of a point where fate takes place because in some ways they're not supposed to be together. I think the cross represents fate and destiny. The fact that we were told that at the beginning of the play, in the prologue, that a pair of star-crossed lovers will take their life, I think adds weight to this idea that crosses or the intersection of things can represent fate and destiny. There's lots of suggestions through the play that there's a foreshadowing, that something is just inevitable, it's unavoidable. And one way a cross shows this is when, in the Baz Luhrmann version, Romeo he's shot Tybalt, and he's looking up at the statue of Jesus. Now, Jesus there is not literally in this form of the cross, but Jesus is kind of standing like this, which is kind of a cross form, and we associate Jesus with a cross. But here, because Romeo is saying, I am fortune's fool, Jesus, in some form of a cross shape, is representing, destiny. He's God in some sense. Therefore, this is the use of like cross imagery in Baz Luhrmann's film again sort of draws attention to the idea that fate is inevitable. Finally, the cross the cross symbolizes sacrifice. This is what the cross means in Christianity, is that Jesus sacrificed his life to bring peace and redemption to the world. That's what the crucifix represents. And in a way, Romeo and Juliet sacrifice themselves. They don't necessarily do it deliberately to bring peace between the Montagues and the Capulets, but their death brings about the peace. I think the line is, none but their death could remove, referring to the conflict between the two families. So I think some of the use of the crosses at the end of the play that I've already mentioned highlight the idea that Romeo and Juliet, through their deaths, bring about peace in the same way that Jesus' sacrifice brings about peace and redemption for the world in Christian thought. So I think the fixation or the prevalence of that the director Baz Luhrmann or the producers of the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet version of Romeo and Juliet really comes from wanting to emphasize these three things in their interpretation of the play. That death is prevalent, that fate is preordained or inevitable, and that Romeo and Juliet bring about peace between the families at great cost to themselves through their sacrifice.